The night was eerily quiet, but deep in the darkness, a chilling discovery was about to unfold, one that would spark a criminal investigation filled with twists, lies, and a mysterious disappearance. 911, what is the address of the emergency? There's some pools of blood. I'm guessing it's just an animal, but near the water right by the river, there's a shoe everywhere, all over the place. The voice on the phone was shaky, but there was urgency in it. What seemed like a routine call would soon reveal a scene that would haunt everyone involved. The Jordan River in Utah was known for its tranquil flow, a peaceful retreat for joggers and nature lovers. But on March 11, 2012, that peace was shattered. As the caller described the pools of blood, a sense of dread began to settle in the air. The investigators arrived at the scene, their eyes immediately drawn to the shoe in the river, the blood, the signs of a struggle. The detectives knew they were about to unravel something far worse than anyone could imagine. They meticulously analyzed the bloodstains on the rocks, testing to confirm whether it was human or animal blood. The waiting felt endless. Then came the confirmation. It was human blood. The search for answers led investigators along the riverbank, each step becoming more desperate as they failed to locate the person responsible for the bloodshed. Hours passed, and just as hope began to dwindle, a breakthrough came from the other side of the river. There, lying lifeless in the water, was the body of a young girl. It was a scene straight out of a nightmare. The girl, later identified as 15-year-old Annie Kaspersack, had been submerged in the water for hours. Her face was swollen, bearing signs of severe trauma. Her forehead had been shattered, making her unrecognizable. The autopsy confirmed what everyone feared. Annie had died from multiple blunt force injuries to her head. But there was one eerie clue that stood out. The shoe found by the jogger near the river, it matched the one worn by the young girl. The police had to act fast. They immediately called for a press conference, sharing details of the tragic discovery in the hopes that someone would come forward with information. A mile away, Veronica Kaspersack, Annie's mother, sat in her living room. As she switched on the TV to catch the news, her heart dropped into her stomach. The face on the screen was unmistakable. Could this be her daughter? Veronica's mind raced as she thought back to the night before. Annie had been acting strange. She had been living under a cloud of tension and confusion, and now her worst fear was slowly becoming a reality. The previous night had started like any other. Veronica and her husband James had returned from a dinner date. Annie had greeted them excitedly at the door, but something felt off. As Veronica got ready to shower, she noticed that Annie had slipped away from the kitchen and disappeared into her room. By 8:40 p.m., Veronica hadn't seen or heard from her daughter since they arrived home. Alarmed, she went upstairs to check on Annie, only to find her room empty. Her heart raced as she called out to her husband, who soon found a note that Annie had left behind. The note was shocking. Annie claimed she had run away to California. She confessed that she had lied about being pregnant, a lie that had plagued her life for some time. Annie wrote that she could no longer bear the weight of the lies. With heavy hearts, Veronica and James called the authorities to report their daughter as a runaway. But as the hours stretched on, Veronica couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something more had happened to Annie. Then, the next morning, as Veronica watched the news, the truth came crashing down. It was Annie, her daughter, gone, just as the police had discovered. The reality was too much to bear. Veronica's breath hitched as the police confirmed the grim discovery. Annie's body, discarded by the river, had been brutally attacked and left to die. The case shifted from a missing person to a murder investigation, and now the police needed answers. As investigators began their search for answers, they turned their attention to Annie's background. Annie had a complicated history. She had bounced between foster homes for years before Veronica, an employee at Child Services, became her case manager. Over time, a deep bond had developed between Veronica and Annie, and the two became close, eventually leading Veronica and her then-husband Dennis to adopt Annie as their own. Despite the challenges that came with her adoption, Annie had found a semblance of peace. However, the strain of her tumultuous past and her complicated relationships still haunted her. Annie's journals provided a glimpse into the struggles she faced. The investigators found troubling entries in her journals that seemed to reveal her obsession with her boyfriend, Christopher Bagshaw. There were rumors that she was pregnant with his child, rumors that both Annie and Christopher had spread at school. But the autopsy report would later confirm that Annie was not pregnant. So why had she lied about it? Veronica believed that Annie's false pregnancy story was an attempt to build a sense of family, a family that she could call her own. This revelation pointed to a deeper emotional struggle, one that seemed to be exacerbated by Annie's tumultuous relationships. The investigation into Christopher Bagshaw, Annie's boyfriend, became the focal point. But what investigators soon discovered was that Christopher wasn't being fully honest about his involvement with Annie. His response to questions about their relationship raised red flags, and it wasn't long before he became a suspect in the investigation. Christopher, an emotionally detached 17-year-old, was questioned extensively. He revealed that he knew Annie had been planning to run away, but he claimed to know nothing about her ultimate fate. However, as the police dug deeper into their investigation, they uncovered unsettling details. Christopher had been in contact with a mysterious individual named LJ. Investigators learned that LJ was a 17-year-old with gang ties, and his relationship with Annie was shrouded in secrecy. Christopher's reluctance to talk about LJ only fueled suspicions, and as the investigation continued, it became clear that LJ was a key figure in the case. The police discovered that Annie had been in contact with a blocked number on the night of her death. The calls made from this number seemed to correspond with the time of Annie's murder, and investigators began to connect the dots. The investigation into LJ intensified. After a week of frustrating dead ends, a tip from an unlikely source finally broke the case wide open. Joanna Franklin, a known criminal with ties to credit card theft, came forward with a shocking revelation. She claimed to have witnessed Annie S. murder and was willing to exchange the information for leniency on her own charges. Joanna's testimony introduced a new layer of complexity to the case. She named LJ as the person who had murdered Annie, but she also implicated another individual, John, a convicted felon and gang member. According to Joanna, LJ and John had been involved in Annie's death, and she provided crucial details that led investigators to their next steps. With Joanna's information, the police raided John's residence, only to find signs of a cover-up. The walls were freshly painted, and the carpet had been removed. It was clear that someone had tried to conceal evidence of a crime. The investigation into John intensified, but the physical evidence wasn't enough to charge him yet. Through a series of revelations, it became clear that Christopher had been lying about everything. He had made up the entire story about LJ to deflect suspicion. The truth was even more sinister. Christopher had been the one to murder Annie. Driven by jealousy and a desire to control, he had planned her death after learning about the pregnancy rumors she had spread. Christopher's confession sent shockwaves through the investigation. He had killed Annie because he believed she was pregnant with his child, a belief that was entirely false. But his actions, fueled by his own insecurities and rage, had led to the brutal murder of a young girl with so much potential. Christopher Bagshaw was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The case was a tragic reminder of the consequences of lies, jealousy, and unchecked emotions. Annie Kaspersack, a young girl who had once dreamed of a better life, was gone. And Christopher, a young man who once called her his girlfriend, would spend the rest of his life in prison for her murder. The investigation was over, but the scars left on Annie's family would last forever. Veronica and James would never see their daughter again, and the truth of what had happened would haunt them for the rest of their lives.